Hi everybody, so this is to let you know about a free event we have coming up this weekend. So it's the 25th and 26th of September. It's called the State of Sensemaking. And like all of the events we put on, it's really a combination of ideas and practices. So what are the ideas we really need that are helpful for us in the post-COVID landscape, the frameworks, and then what practices actually make us better at navigating that landscape. So we have old favorites like John VERVAEKE, Jamie WHEAL, coming to give us some bigger framings. And then we also have people like SARA NESS and new guest to the channel, BOEREE, who's a former pro poker player, going to be talking about game theory. So Greg Thomas, who's been on the channel before, Pamela Fonsabliar, the list sort of goes on, but it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of combination of ideas and practices sort of blended together and quite an immersive experience as well.
And the kind of why this, why now is that in this kind of late COVID landscape, there's so many topics that are splitting people apart. You've got the vaccine issue being the obvious one, attitudes to lockdowns. It feels like all of these topics are now sort of just being pulled into the culture war, pulled into these sort of really polarizing discussions between people. We've known from conversations we've had in our community that they're straining relationships, they're straining family relationships, they're breaking friendships. Depending on whichever side that you come from, whatever your perspective is on, I mean, conspiracy theories is another one, kind of alternative narratives. And the sense is, okay, as we were talking it through, what are the techniques, what are the practices that we can offer and that have been shared by a lot of the people we've had on the channel that can help work through some of these issues, no matter what your particular kind of conceptual understanding of it, what John VERVAEKE would call propositional level knowing. There's another level of knowing of like, how do you have generative conversations? How do you listen to what someone else is saying? How do you steel man different positions? And all of these different techniques that we're going to be introducing over the course of the weekend are hopefully kind of at this higher level of how do we restore generative conversation? How do we restore some sense of connection between ourselves?
Yeah, something you said just really struck me as something I think we've both noticed is that right now it feels like these divisions, which were of course present pre-COVID, have been enhanced. And it really feels like in many cases, much like people describe how civil wars start, splitting families, splitting relationships right down the middle. And so this question of how do we talk to each other about difficult ideas, which has been kind of core to what we've been doing from the beginning, feels even more important than it ever has. And what actually excites me a lot about this event is that a lot of the practices that have been really come from, you know, different contemplative traditions, and then maybe a little bit later on from sort of the well-being industry, like mindfulness, like dialogue practices. It's about applying those to where the rubber meets the road in a new way. And that's something that is incredibly exciting, because I think right now, that's what those practices are best used for. You know, we can sit and better ourselves and be Zen, which, you know, nothing against that, but how do we actually apply them? How do we actually use practices like regulating our nervous system, zooming out of our frame of reference, zooming back into it? How do we actually do that to have that conversation with somebody in our life where we're just not able to meet each other, and to make sure that conversation goes somewhere new for both of us? Like that for me is far more exciting than some sense of general well-being. And so, you know, one of the people who I think has been most influential on our thinking is John VERVAEKE. And John actually describes that process really well in terms of cognitive science of why these practices are important. And he has a really great metaphor that he used in recent Sensemaking 101 session that we thought would be a nice way to illustrate what he's going to be talking about on the weekend as well.
So think of relevance realization as a way in which your mind is focusing your attention. It's framing your attention, just like my glasses. And notice that I'm looking through my glasses in both senses. I'm looking by means of them and beyond them. And in that way, my glasses are transparent to me. But one of the things I sometimes need to do is take my glasses off and step back and look at them, to look at my mental framing, look at it rather than through it. I would argue that many of the mindfulness meditation practices like Vipassana are designed to exactly train that ability.
So also joining us is SARA NESS, who some viewers might be familiar with. SARA's kind of a force of nature in many ways, and really an innovative facilitator in this area. So she's been using kind of authentic dialogue techniques to tackle hot cultural topics. What I love about her work as well is that she uses a lot of games. So she kind of gamifies the process, which, for example, we'll be doing a steel manning game. So, we talk about steel manning a lot. Talking about someone else's position as best you can. It's actually much easier through a game, so that's going to be quite a lot of fun. We have a clip of Sarah talking about another game that she uses as well.
If I could give you any practice, it's actually to start noticing when things shift in someone else externally, and when things shift in yourself, because those are where you really start to see what the inflection points are, what someone else values, what triggers them, what triggers you. You can't have a conflict conversation unless you know where the conflict is coming from. And the conflict doesn't happen in the moment that the other person starts speaking angrily. The conflict happens in the moment where they cross their arms, or they look away, or their face falls, or you feel frustrated, whatever it is. Like, that's when you hit something.
And we've also got some of the channel favorites. So Jamie Wheel will also be taking part on the Saturday. And Jamie recently put out his Recapture the Rapture book, which was really about how we are being captured by these kind of apocalyptic ways of thinking, and also sketched out his way through that, which is to harness flow states, to harness kind of group experiences to find truth together.
That would be the kind of the 5 elements, right? The metaphysics, how do we make sense of the ineffable? The ethics, how do we steer of what ought we do, even if these experiences are fundamentally antinomian and anti-authority. Sacraments, how do we renew our own lived experience that is at the core of a community? Scriptures, what stories do we look to guide us? And deities, what do we do to personify or instantiate a vision of the sublime that actually includes as much of the wonky, messy, ineffable mystery?
So we also have Liv BOEREE, and Liv is a former pro poker player, was really successful as a poker player, and is also a scientist, and she has her own YouTube channel and focuses on, in particular, game theory and complexity. So we've talked a lot about game theory on the channel and its usefulness for kind of helping us zoom out and look at the various incentive structures and dynamics of culture. And so Liv will be talking about that, and we're also going to be doing a little bit of experimentation with some live game theory games, basically, as a group.
And I would sometimes try and, I'd be playing, and I would, facing a big difficult decision. Someone's put me all in on the river. I'm facing my tournament life, heart's pumping in my ears, and my gut will be saying, "Oh no, fold. They've got it this time," and the maths will be saying, "Call. No, you've got to call. You've got, your hand is statistically good enough to do so." And I would, for a while, I would be like, "Well, my gut is so strong. I'm going to just listen to that." And I don't know whether it's more often than not, but on a sufficient number of occasions, my gut was completely wrong. I was like, this is interesting, because everyone's been telling me, but everyone in the world tells you, oh no, trust your gut. When it's got a really strong feeling, it knows something that you don't. And it's like, well, this is clearly not true, because it's often wrong.
So we have lots more going on as well. We have Greg Thomas, who's been on the channel before, who's going to be doing process around sort of developmental theory and applying that to culture. We have Pamela von Sabeljaar, who's doing emergent dialogue practice.
We've also got a session from Eli Tyre of the rationalist community. And the rationalists are quite an influential tribe, as from Peter Lindbergh's idea of the mimetic tribes. The rationalists are quite a strong tribe, very influential in Silicon Valley. And they've developed a lot of really interesting techniques and practices for how to think better and how to identify our cognitive biases. So I think they've got a lot of really interesting tech to add to this conversation.
So if you'd like to join, again, it's a free event. You can find the link to it down in the show notes. It's on the 25th, Saturday the 25th, Sunday the 26th of September. And it starts in the sort of mid-afternoon Europe time and in the morning US time. So hope to see you there.
Our ability to make sense of the world is breaking down.
We're making more and more consequential choices with worse and worse sense-making to inform those choices, which is kind of running increasingly fast through the woods, increasingly blind.
Over the last 2 years, Rebel Wisdom has interviewed some of the world's top thinkers. Now we've brought them together for an 8-week online course, Sensemaking 101, with Daniel Schmachtenberger, Diane Musho-Hamilton, John VERVAEKE, and more. Improve your sense-making, develop your sovereignty, and join a wider community looking to do the same.